The slap echoed so loudly that even the traffic seemed to pause. People turned. In the middle of a crowded downtown street, a well-dressed young man had just slapped an old street sweeper across the face. The broom fell from the old man's hands. Dust rose into the air. "Watch where you're swinging that thing, you useless old fool," the young man shouted, adjusting his expensive sunglasses. His two friends burst into laughter, recording everything on their phones. The old sweeper swayed slightly, but he didn't fall. Slowly, very slowly, he lifted his head. His face was calm, too calm. He wore faded clothes, worn-out shoes, and a cap that shaded his eyes. To everyone watching, he looked like just another invisible worker people pass by every day without a second thought. But when he looked up, something in his eyes made the laughter weaken. The young bully stepped closer and pushed him again. "What, you angry? You people should be grateful we even let you work here." A small crowd began forming. Vendors, office workers, a mother holding her child. No one stepped forward. The old sweeper quietly picked up his broom. "You dropped this," the bully mocked, kicking a pile of trash toward him. Then the old sweeper spoke, his voice low, steady. "You shouldn't raise your hand so easily." The bully smirked. Or what? What no one on that street realized, that poor sweeper was actually Steven Seagal, a retired undercover police legend who once led some of the most dangerous operations in the country. A man trained to end violence in seconds. A man who had faced armed criminals without blinking. And the young bully had just made the worst mistake of his life. Because in the next few minutes, this busy street would witness something none of them would ever forget. The street was known for its noise. Car horns layered over vendor calls, office workers rushed past fruit stalls, motorbikes squeezed between luxury sedans. It was the kind of place where everyone was busy and no one really looked at anyone else. At the corner, near a traffic light, stood the old sweeper. Every morning before sunrise, he arrived quietly. He swept the sidewalks, cleared the drains, stacked fallen cardboard boxes neatly beside shops. He never argued about payment, never complained about the heat, never reacted when people ignored him. Most people didn't even know his name. They just called him Baba. But if anyone had looked closely, really closely, they might have noticed something unusual. His posture, though slightly bent, never truly looked weak. His movements were efficient, controlled. When he swept, his eyes weren't wandering aimlessly. They scanned reflections in store windows, noticed parked vehicles that didn't belong, counted how many security cameras were working and which ones weren't. He saw everything. And then there was Armand. Armand arrived late every morning in a different luxury car. Some days it was a red sports model, other days a matte black SUV. His designer shoes never touched dust unless he wanted to make a point. He was the son of a powerful real estate businessman. Everyone on that street knew it. Shopkeepers forced smiles when he passed. Vendors pretended not to notice when he took fruit without paying. Delivery boys moved aside quickly when he walked by. Armand loved attention, especially online. He often filmed funny videos, mocking street workers, teasing delivery drivers, throwing coins at beggars, and laughing when they scrambled to pick them up. His followers flooded the comments with fire emojis and laughing faces. But today, his mood was worse than usual. He had lost a business deal that morning. His friends had mocked him for it. His ego was bruised. And wounded egos look for easy targets. As Armand stepped out of his car, he deliberately dropped his empty coffee cup onto the freshly swept pavement. He looked directly at the sweeper. "Oops," he said sarcastically. The sweeper paused, then calmly walked over and picked it up without a word. Armand's friends snickered. "Say thank you," one of them joked. The old man met Armand's eyes briefly. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was assessment. That look irritated Armand more than any insult could have. "Why are you staring? You think you're equal to me?" The surrounding vendors lowered their heads. They had seen this pattern before. Armand liked pushing until someone reacted, then humiliating them further. The tea seller nearby whispered to a customer, "That old man isn't ordinary." "What do you mean?" the customer asked. The tea seller shrugged. "Just the way he moves." Across the street, a delivery rider adjusted his helmet, sensing tension building. Armand stepped closer to the sweeper, invading his space. "How much do you earn in a month? I spend that on one dinner." No reply. The sweeper continued working. That silence felt like defiance, and Armand hated being ignored. Without warning, he kicked over the sweeper's small cart. Trash bags spilled open. Dust scattered across the sidewalk again. Gasps rose from the crowd. The old man bent down and began picking everything up, slowly, methodically. Armand pulled out his phone and started recording. "See this? This is what happens when people forget their place." One of his friends added, "Make him apologize for blocking your way earlier." Armand smiled at that idea. He grabbed the old man's shoulder and spun him around roughly. "Apologize." The old man's cap fell slightly back, revealing his eyes more clearly now. They were calm, too calm. "I did nothing wrong," the old man said quietly. Those 5 words felt heavier than shouting. For a split second, something shifted in the air. Even Armand's friends sensed it, but pride pushed him forward. He leaned in closer. "You don't talk back to me." The street felt smaller, tighter, as if waiting. A black SUV turned slowly into the far end of the road, unnoticed by most. The tea seller stopped pouring tea. The delivery rider didn't start his engine. The mother holding her child took a step backward. Armand raised his hand. And this time, it wasn't just about disrespect. It was about dominance. And sometimes, when someone tries too hard to prove power, they awaken something far more powerful than themselves.
Have you ever seen someone misuse power just because they thought no one would challenge them? And if you were standing there on that street, would you have stepped in or stayed silent?
The slap came fast, sharp, loud, echoing off the shop windows. For a second, even the traffic seemed to hesitate. The old sweeper's face turned with the impact. His cap fell to the ground this time. A thin line of red appeared near his lip. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Armand lowered his hand slowly, flexing his fingers as if proud of the sting. His friends cheered behind him, still recording. "Now," Armand said coldly, "apologize." The old man remained still. Then he straightened, not dramatically, not aggressively, but fully. The slight bend in his back disappeared, his shoulders aligned, his breathing slowed. The air around him felt different, heavier. He picked up his cap and dusted it off. When he looked at Armand again, there was no trace of weakness left. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. Armand laughed louder. "Or what? You'll hit me back?" He shoved the old man's chest. What happened next was so fast that most of the phone's recording didn't capture it clearly. The sweeper's hand moved, not in anger, but in precision. He redirected Armand's wrist, stepped slightly to the side, and applied controlled pressure to the elbow joint. Armand's body twisted unnaturally. In less than a second, the wealthy bully was on his knees. A collective gasp exploded from the crowd. "Let go! Let go!" Armand screamed. The old man's face remained calm. His grip wasn't violent, just exact. "You use your hands too easily. Learn control." He released him. Armand stumbled backward, clutching his arm, humiliated more than hurt. His friends rushed forward. One swung wildly. The old sweeper pivoted, minimal movement, guiding the attacker's momentum forward until he crashed into a parked scooter. The second friend tried to grab him from behind. Without even turning fully, the old man shifted his weight, trapping the wrist and gently sweeping the leg. The friend hit the ground hard, stunned. The entire exchange lasted less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds, and 3 younger, stronger men were on the pavement. Silence swallowed the street. No dramatic poses, no heavy breathing. The old man simply adjusted his sleeve and picked up his broom. Across the road, an elderly man who had been watching carefully whispered, "That's not street fighting." "What is it then?" someone asked. "Discipline." Armand struggled to his feet, rage mixing with embarrassment. "You're dead. Do you know who my father is?" The old sweeper met his eyes. "Yes," he said calmly. "Do you?" That line confused Armand more than it intimidated him. He charged again, reckless this time. The old man stepped forward instead of backward. One precise movement, a controlled palm strike to the chest, not enough to injure, but enough to stop momentum. Armand froze mid-step, air knocked from his lungs. The sweeper leaned in slightly and whispered something only Armand could hear, and whatever he said made Armand's face drain of color. At the far end of the street, the black SUV that had turned in earlier now stopped completely. The doors didn't open yet, but its engine remained running. Several bystanders began murmuring, "Call the police. Is that man military? No ordinary sweeper moves like that." One of the vendors noticed something else. The old man's eyes weren't filled with anger. They were calculating, watching not just Armand, but the surroundings, entry points, exit routes, windows above, the SUV, as if he was used to chaos, as if chaos was something he once commanded. Armand, breathing heavily, tried to regain his pride. "You think you've won?" he said, forcing a laugh. "You're finished in this city." The old sweeper planted his broom upright beside him. "I finished worse men before breakfast," he replied quietly. The statement wasn't loud, but it carried weight. A siren sounded faintly in the distance. Some assumed someone had already called the police, but the sweeper didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked like he had been expecting it. Armand wiped sweat from his forehead, trying to appear fearless while glancing nervously at the SUV now parked clearly in view. The tinted windows reflected the crowd. Then, slowly, one of the SUV doors opened, and that's when the situation stopped being a street fight and started being something much, much bigger. The SUV door opened slowly. Polished black shoes touched the pavement first. Then another door opened, and another. 3 men stepped out, all in sharp suits, earpieces visible, movements coordinated and alert. The crowd instinctively stepped back. Armand swallowed. "Who did you call?" one of his friends whispered nervously. "I didn't call anyone," Armand snapped, but his voice lacked confidence. The suited men didn't look at Armand. They walked straight toward the old sweeper. Their posture changed as they approached. Straight backs, controlled expressions. Respect. The tallest of them stopped a few feet away from the old man and gave a subtle nod. "Sir." The word hit the air like thunder. The crowd exchanged confused glances. "Sir?" Armand blinked. "You've got to be kidding me." The old sweeper didn't respond immediately. He simply picked up his broom again and rested both hands on it. "You're late," he said calmly. "Traffic was blocked 2 streets down. We moved as soon as we confirmed the situation." "Confirmed?" Armand's heart began to pound. One of the suited men turned slightly, scanning the area. His eyes paused on Armand and his friends, lying disheveled on the pavement. "Is this the individual?" he asked quietly. The old sweeper finally looked at Armand. "Yes." That single word carried something heavier than accusation. It sounded like documentation, like evidence. Armand forced a laugh again. "What is this? Some kind of drama? You think wearing suits makes you important?" No one laughed with him this time. A police siren grew louder. 2 patrol cars pulled up beside the SUV. But instead of rushing toward the sweeper, the officers stepped out and stood still. One of them recognized the old man instantly. His posture straightened sharply. He gave a full salute. "Commander." A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. "Commander?" Armand's confidence cracked visibly now. The officer approached carefully. "Sir, we received a priority signal. Are you harmed?" "I'm fine." Priority signal. The suited man held up a small device, barely noticeable before, clipped to the inside of the old man's worn jacket. Armand stared at it in disbelief. "You're telling me this garbage collector has bodyguards?" he said weakly. The tallest suited man turned toward Armand with a calm but chilling gaze. "Show respect." The officer addressed the crowd, voice clear and official. "This man is a decorated former undercover commander who led multiple high-risk operations nationwide." Murmurs turned into stunned silence. Someone whispered a name, and another repeated it louder. It began spreading through the bystanders. "Is that really?" The officer nodded toward the old man. "Yes, this is Seagal, retired, but still active in special advisory roles. Phones that were once recording for entertainment were now recording history." Armand's face drained of color. "You're lying," he muttered. The old sweeper, no, the commander, removed his cap fully now. Without the shadow over his face, recognition clicked for many. Older shopkeepers gasped. "I've seen him on the news years ago. He took down that smuggling ring. He disappeared after retirement." The commander looked around the street slowly. "I didn't disappear. I stepped back." One of the suited men handed him a clean cloth for the blood near his lip. He waved it off. Armand stumbled backward, shaking his head. "No, this is insane. Why are you dressed like this? Why are you sweeping streets?" The commander met his eyes again. "Because service doesn't end with rank." That sentence landed harder than any strike. The police officer stepped toward Armand now. "Sir, we have video evidence of assault." Suddenly, several vendors stepped forward nervously. "And harassment," one fruit seller added. "And intimidation," another said. The tea seller raised his hand slightly. "This isn't the first time." Armand turned in panic. "You people are exaggerating." But his live stream was still running. Thousands were watching in real time. The comments flooding his screen were no longer cheering, they were condemning. The suited man spoke quietly to the commander. "Sir, media monitoring confirms this is trending." The commander sighed softly. "I was hoping for a quiet morning." He stepped closer to Armand, not threatening, not aggressive, just present. "You thought I was weak because of my clothes. You thought respect was something earned by money." Armand couldn't maintain eye contact anymore. In the reflection of the SUV's tinted window, he saw himself clearly for the first time that day. Not powerful, not admired, just exposed. The officer gently took Armand's wrist. "Sir, you'll need to come with us." Armand looked desperately at the commander. "Please, I didn't know." The commander's expression didn't change. "That's the point," he replied quietly. The street that once felt ordinary had now transformed into a courtroom without walls, and this time, the verdict was no longer in Armand's hands. Armand's wrists trembled as the officer held them, not cuffed yet, but firmly controlled. "Sir, please," Armand whispered, his voice no longer loud enough for the cameras he once loved. "It was just a misunderstanding." The commander, once seen as nothing more than a street sweeper, studied him carefully. "A misunderstanding," he repeated calmly, "is when two people see the same thing differently." He stepped slightly closer. "What you did was a decision." The street had gone silent again. Even the traffic seemed distant now, as if the world had stepped back to watch what would unfold. One of the suited men approached with a tablet. "Sir," he said quietly to the commander, "we've confirmed something else." The commander didn't look surprised. "Go on." "The redevelopment case, the one involving illegal evictions in this district." A murmur passed through the shopkeepers. The tea seller stiffened. The fruit vendor lowered his head. Armand's breathing quickened. The suited man turned the tablet so the commander could see. "The company listed under investigation belongs to Armand's father." The air shifted again. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Armand's face turned pale. "That's business. It has nothing to do with this." The commander looked at him steadily. Everything has something to do with this. The officer beside Armand spoke firmly. We've had multiple complaints about forced property clearances in this neighborhood. One elderly shopkeeper stepped forward, voice shaking. They tried to remove us last month, said the land was being repurposed. Another added, we were told we'd receive compensation. We never did. Armand shook his head wildly. I don't handle that. That's my father's department. The commander folded his hands behind his back, a posture of authority that no uniform was needed to confirm. You represent the same name, he said quietly. A heavy silence followed. The suited man continued. Sir, we also traced recent threats sent to vendors here. The phone numbers link back to Armand's personal assistant. Armand's knees nearly gave out. This is insane. This is a setup. The commander's eyes hardened slightly, not with anger, but with clarity. No, he said, this is consequence. One of the officers finally placed handcuffs on Armand, not aggressively, but with finality. The metallic click echoed, but the commander raised his hand. Wait. The officer paused. The crowd leaned in. Armand looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. The commander walked slowly around him. You humiliated workers for entertainment. You abused people you thought were powerless. He stopped directly in front of him. But today, you're going to learn something. He turned to the officer. Do not parade him through the street. The officer nodded. Take him through the back. Let the law handle this quietly. Armand blinked in confusion. You're not going to make an example of me? The commander's voice remained steady. Justice is not revenge. That sentence struck deeper than the slap from earlier, but the twist wasn't finished. The suited man leaned closer to the commander and spoke softly. Sir, there's one more update. The commander gave a slight nod. The redevelopment project here has been suspended as of this morning. Gasps broke out. Suspended? The tea seller repeated. Yes, the suited man confirmed. Pending a full corruption review. Armand's eyes widened. You knew? He asked the commander. The commander looked at him calmly. I've been consulting on this case for 3 months. 3 months. Working quietly, observing, listening, sweeping the very streets that were about to be erased by greedy contracts. He hadn't chosen this location randomly. He had embedded himself in the community, to understand it, to protect it. The fruit vendor wiped tears from his eyes. You were gathering evidence. The commander nodded once. Sometimes the best way to see the truth, he said, is to stand where no one thinks you matter. Armand's confidence had completely collapsed now. You set me up, he whispered. No, he replied. You revealed yourself. The officers began guiding Armand towards the patrol car. This time, the crowd didn't look afraid. They looked relieved. The black SUV doors opened again, ready to escort the commander away. But before stepping in, he turned back towards the street. The same street he had swept that morning. The same street where he had been slapped. He picked up his broom one last time and handed it to the tea seller. Keep it, he said gently, not as a symbol of weakness, but of dignity. The tea seller held it with trembling hands. The commander walked towards the SUV, not like a hero seeking applause, but like a man finishing a job. As the vehicle doors closed, Armand looked back one last time. For the first time in his life, he understood what real power looked like. And it wasn't loud, it was disciplined. Before we move to the final part, tell me honestly, do you think the commander showed mercy, or should he have been harsher? The patrol car door shut with a dull thud. For the first time that morning, Armand wasn't surrounded by laughter, music, or cameras capturing him in control. He was alone in the back seat. Outside, the crowd slowly began to breathe again. The commander's black SUV didn't drive away immediately. It remained parked at the edge of the street, engine humming softly, as if the story wasn't finished yet. Because it wasn't. Across town, in a glass-walled corporate office, Armand's father was in the middle of a meeting when his phone began vibrating repeatedly. He ignored it at first. Then the messages kept coming. Links, alerts, notifications. One headline froze him. Business heir arrested after assaulting retired police commander. His face drained of color. Within minutes, he was watching the viral live stream replay, the slap, the takedown, the salute, the revelation. He didn't look angry. He looked exposed. Back on the street, officers began speaking to vendors one by one, taking formal statements. For years, many of them had stayed silent out of fear. Today, something had shifted. The fruit vendor stepped forward first. They pressured us to sell below value, threatened to cut utilities. The tailor added, they sent notices with false deadlines. The tea seller clutched the broom tightly. We were told we had no choice. Each testimony stacked quietly like bricks, and the commander listened. Not as a celebrity, not as a legend, but as a protector finishing unfinished work. One of the suited men approached him. Sir, media presence is increasing. Reporters are on their way. The commander exhaled slowly. He never enjoyed attention. Let them report facts, not drama. Meanwhile, inside the patrol car, Armand stared at his reflection in the metal divider. His cheek still burned, not from being struck, but from humiliation. For years, his power had been inherited, borrowed, untested. Today, it collapsed in public view. When the car arrived at the station, officers guided him inside. No rough handling, no spectacle. Inside the station lobby, several officers who had once served under the commander stood respectfully as he entered behind them. Whispers followed him. Is that really him? He came back? He never really left. Armand noticed the respect. It wasn't fear, it wasn't forced, it was earned. His father arrived 20 minutes later, breathless, suit jacket unbuttoned. He didn't shout, he didn't argue with the officers. He walked straight to his son. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. Armand tried to explain, but the words sounded hollow. "It was just some old man." His father cut him off sharply. "That old man is the reason half the crime syndicates in this city disappeared 10 years ago." Silence. The weight of reality pressed down harder than any punishment. The commander approached them calmly. Mr. Khan, Armand's father, straightened instinctively. "Commander," he said respectfully, "I apologize for my son's behavior." The commander studied him. "Your son's behavior," he replied evenly, "is not separate from the environment he learned it in." That line struck deeper than expected. Mr. Khan didn't argue, because somewhere inside he knew it was true. The investigation files were already in motion: audits, property records, transaction histories. The redevelopment project was officially frozen by evening. News outlets reported on corruption reviews instead of luxury expansions. And for the first time in years, the vendors on that street closed their shops that night with something unfamiliar in their hearts: relief. As the sun began to set, the commander returned once more to the street, without cameras this time. The tea seller approached him nervously. "Sir, why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" The commander looked at the broom now leaning against the stall. Because respect that depends on identity isn't real. A young delivery boy, the same one who had watched silently earlier, stepped forward. "I wanted to help, but I was scared." The commander placed a firm but gentle hand on his shoulder. "Courage doesn't mean you never feel fear. It means you choose what matters more." The streetlights flickered on. Life resumed. Cars moved. Vendors rearranged goods. But something fundamental had changed. Not because a legend fought back, but because truth had stood still long enough for everyone to see it. As the commander prepared to leave for the final time that day, he glanced once more at the pavement he had swept that morning. Clean, orderly, protected. And somewhere in the distance, sirens echoed again. Not for chaos this time, but for justice finally catching up.
By the next morning, the street felt different. Not quieter, not slower, but lighter. Shopkeepers opened their shutters with cautious optimism. The tea seller arranged his cups with steadier hands. The fruit vendor smiled at customers instead of scanning the road nervously. News vans had come and gone. Social media had already moved on to the next scandal. But for the people who lived and worked there, the impact remained. Armand spent the night in custody. No special treatment, no luxury. Just a plain bench, white walls, and silence loud enough to force reflection. For the first time in his life, no one laughed at his jokes. No one flattered him. No one feared him. His father, Mr. Khan, sat in his office long after midnight reviewing documents he had ignored for years, property acquisitions, eviction notices, pressure tactics used by managers under his authority. He began to see what he had allowed, not directly, but through neglect. And neglect can be just as damaging as intention. Back on the street, the commander arrived one final time, not in the black SUV, but on foot. The vendors noticed him immediately. He was dressed simply again, no suit, no escort, just calm presence. The tea seller hurried over. "Sir, you didn't have to come back." "I said I would finish my work," the commander replied. He picked up the broom leaning against the stall, the same broom, and began sweeping again. People passing by slowed down when they recognized him. Some whispered, some nodded respectfully, but he didn't acknowledge the attention, because attention was never the mission. A young boy approached him, the same child who had watched from his mother's side the day before. "Are you really a hero?" the boy asked. The commander paused, resting his hands on the broom. "A hero," he repeated thoughtfully. "No. But you stopped the bad guy." He smiled slightly. "Stopping someone once doesn't make you strong. Choosing to be disciplined every day does." The boy looked confused but thoughtful. The tea seller joined them. "Sir, why work like this when you could live comfortably?" The commander's gaze drifted down the street, at the small shops, the cracked pavement, the people who kept it alive. Because service isn't about rank, it's about responsibility. At that moment, a black car stopped nearby. Mr. Khan stepped out alone. No bodyguards, no arrogance. He walked slowly toward the commander. The vendors tensed, unsure what to expect. Mr. Khan stopped a respectful distance away. "I came to say something," he began quietly. The commander waited. "I reviewed everything last night. The redevelopment project is permanently canceled." Murmurs spread again. Mr. Khan continued, "And full compensation will be issued to every shop owner who was pressured." The fruit vendor's eyes filled with tears. The tea seller exhaled deeply. "And my son?" the commander asked calmly. Mr. Khan lowered his head slightly. "He will face the legal process, and he will work here, under supervision, community service." A powerful silence followed. Not revenge, not humiliation, correction. The commander nodded once. "That's a start." Mr. Khan hesitated. "Why didn't you expose us earlier?" The commander resumed sweeping. "Because sometimes," he replied, "people expose themselves when given enough rope." The wind moved lightly through the street. Dust settled. The boy who had asked about heroes picked up a small piece of trash and placed it in a bin. Others noticed. Small actions. Real change often begins quietly. As the morning sun rose higher, the commander placed the broom back against the tea stall. His phone buzzed, another request for consultation, another case waiting. Before leaving, he turned to the vendors. "Take care of the street," he said. "We will," they replied together. And just like that, he walked away. No applause, no dramatic music, just steady footsteps fading into the rhythm of the city. Because true strength doesn't demand recognition, it leaves impact.
More powerful stories are coming soon, and your feedback helps us make them even better.